Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where flavor meant fortune, where the right handful of dried bark or fragrant seed could be worth more than a soldier's sword or a merchant's house. Tonight we're sailing into the heart of the forgotten spice trade, drifting gently through markets, meadows, palaces, and ships with nothing but scent and story to guide us. Fair warning, you probably won't survive this journey, not because of pirates or jungle heat, but because you might faint dramatically at the prices people once paid for a teaspoon of clove. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from as we wind our way through history together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin not on the open sea, but on the creaking salt-bleached boards of a medieval dockyard. Somewhere in Europe, Venice maybe, or Lisbon. It's early morning. The mist clings low to the ground, and the ropes of the anchored ships sway like lazy snakes. Everything smells faintly of fish sweat and something sharp and distant. Pepper. You walk past barrels stacked like fortresses guarded by men with worn boots and suspicious eyes. Inside those barrels, black peppercorns, dull wrinkled and utterly priceless. It's hard to imagine now, but pepper was once the superstar of the spice world. Not saffron, not cinnamon. Pepper, a spice so ordinary on today's tables, but once so expensive it was stored in lockboxes and counted bead by bead. Historians still argue whether pepper's rise was due to its flavor or its ability to mask the taste of spoiled meat. Either way, it was hot, not in heat, but in demand. You trail a merchant who just received his shipment. He walks like a man cradling his newborn. His chest puffs with pride as he parades down the pier with a tiny pouch weighing less than a kitten and worth more than your month's rent. In the corner of the dockyard, two rival traders argue over a misplaced crate. One claims the contents were tampered with. The other, in a richly dyed cloak, points accusingly at a rat and insists divine punishment is imminent. You pause to watch the argument escalate from threats to an offer of marriage to a sister as compensation. The rat scurries away with no opinion. You step into a customs house where a scribe in blue ink records arrivals. He glances up at you and snorts. Pepper again, he mumbles. Gold with wrinkles. Behind him, hanging on the wall, is a painted sign listing tax rates, woolfish silk, and pepper with its own gold ink column. And still the ships come. One with sails patched in saffron yellow. Another with a carved lion on its prow roaring into the sea spray. They bring not just spices, but stories. Of narrow escapes from pirates. Of storms that sounded like gods arguing. Of entire harbors that smelled like soup for days after a capsized nutmeg barge. You sit on a bale of damp rope legs swinging, and imagine what it must have felt like to be a common sailor paid in coins and crusts while your ship's cargo tiny brown spheres could buy a vineyard. There's something both magical and ridiculous about it. But that's the spice trade for you. A world where flavor meant power, where a pinch of something sharp and bitter might decide treaties, marriages, or wars. The bell of the harbor tower rings muffled by the morning fog. Another ship crests the horizon. You lean back. The wind carries a trace of clove on the air, and your journey has only just begun. You don't stay long at the dock. Soon you're sailing eastward past Europe's edge, past maps that grow uncertain, and dragons drawn in their corners toward a cluster of islands known only to those who really need to know them. The Maluku Islands, the Spice Islands, more specifically, the only place in the known world where clove trees grow wild. The boat you're on is narrow, carved from a single tree, and smells strongly of tar and ambition. It rocks gently, the sail creaking the sky, pinking toward dawn. You're wedged between baskets of dried fish, a crate of birds wrapped in reeds, and a man who insists on playing the same three-note melody on a bamboo flute. The air gets warmer, heavier, like soup made from the ocean. And then you smell it before you see it. That deep, almost floral sharpness. Clove. The trees grow like secrets on volcanic slopes, tall and twisting their branches heavy with green buds that turn red as they ripen. Local harvesters climb barefoot using ropes and instinct shaking the branches until the buds fall like rubies onto tarps below. You step onto land that feels half wild, half cultivated. The earth here is black with ash and soft underfoot. Everything grows fast and in strange shapes. And above it all, the clove trees reaching. Cloves weren't just a luxury spice, they were once believed to cure anything. Toothaches, bad breath, snake bites, broken hearts. Some emperors of China required courtiers to chew clove before speaking to sweeten their breath and their words. Historians still argue whether cloves reached China via overland trade routes or sea voyages. But what's clear is this: they were always worth far more than they looked. You watch a small group of traders from Java argue politely, then less politely, over a shipment. One man swears his cloves were harvested at dawn, the most auspicious hour. Another insists his batch was dried over sacred coals. Someone else bribes the official with a bundle of betel leaves wrapped in silk. In the village square, someone's boiling a stew laced with clove, nutmeg, and cardamom. The scent is thick, almost chewable. A child dances nearby, singing a song about sailors who stole cloves and got lost forever. There's a shrine here, small but bright. It's decorated with clove flowers, painted shells, and a small wooden figure carved with a huge grin. You're told it's the spirit of the tree, the guardian of flavor. He looks like he's keeping a very mischievous secret. You run your fingers over a dried clove. It's tiny, ridged, dark brown and glossy at the tip like it's been sealed with fire. This was once more valuable than gold. Kings sent fleets for it. Pirates murdered for it. Entire wars were fought over who controlled these windswept slopes and the trees they birthed. And the irony, the people who lived here, they used it mostly for cooking and medicine. Not power, not gold, not trade. Just flavor. You lie back on a smooth rock, the heat wrapping around you like a blanket. You close your eyes and imagine the scent of cloves drifting across the sea, carried in crates and pockets in legends. And in that moment, the whole world smells like spice. You leave the volcanic slopes behind and head west through tangled forests, past merchant outposts and spice-slick harbors, until the green gives way to the gold of sun-scorched hills. You're following a trail now, one that winds its way into the heart of Sri Lanka, where cinnamon peels curl like ribbons in the drying wind. You arrive just as the sun begins its lazy descent. The air is thick with salt and leaf smoke, and everything smells warm, sweet, and spiced, and slightly earthy, like someone has been baking for a week in a clay oven hidden beneath the hills. You're in the land of cinnamon, real cinnamon. Cinnamomum verum, true cinnamon, as later botanists would smugly declare. The harvesters here are skilled in a craft that's part art, part ritual. Young men in saffron tunics and woven hats slice delicate strips of bark from slim, pale trees. They roll them into quills with their fingers, arranging them in neat, fragrant stacks to dry in the sun. You wander between the rows, brushing your hand along the edge of a drying frame. A child offers you a piece to chew, giggling as your face crumples at the sudden burst of sweetness and heat. Cinnamon, it turns out, was once considered holy. Egyptians used it in embalming. Romans burned it in temples. Medieval doctors prescribed it for everything from digestion to melancholy. And at one point in European history, cinnamon was more valuable than silver. Historians still argue whether Sri Lanka was the sole source of cinnamon for ancient empires, or just one link in a long, secretive chain. What's certain is that those who controlled this land controlled one of the most lucrative secrets of the pre-modern world. The local king, draped in layers of teal silk and guarded by men with curved spears, treats cinnamon like a royal tax. Every merchant who dares approach must bow, offer tribute, and swear they won't take more than they're granted. You watch one such meeting from a distance, hidden behind a carved column. The tension is real, but so is the reverence. Later in the marketplace, you pass a man selling cinnamon oils from glass vials no larger than your thumb. He waves you over, grinning with teeth stained red from betel. Spice for the stomach, the skin, and the soul, he croons. Even makes lovers forget they were angry. He pauses. Sometimes. Nearby, a priest blesses a shipment of bark bound for Alexandria, rubbing each bundle with turmeric paste and chanting something low and rhythmic. A cow walks straight through the scene unbothered. You step aside, bow slightly to the cow, and continue. At sunset, you climb to the roof of a stone house and sit with a cup of hot spiced tea. A woman beside you, wrapped in russet linen, offers you a pastry filled with honey and something sharp. Cinnamon, she says, but only the right kind. Below the hills glow orange. A cart creaks by, stacked with crates. You can smell their contents from here. It's funny how something so small, so papery and fragile can change the course of empires. You nibble the pastry. Sweet, warm, slightly dangerous, exactly like cinnamon. You drift now to the Banda Islands' green freckles, scattered across the sea like emeralds tossed from the hand of a careless god. You arrive by way of a narrow vessel skimming low across turquoise water, the scent of salt mingling with something sharper, muskier, almost intoxicating. Nutmeg. Here the trees grow modestly shorter than you expected, their leaves glossy and oval-shaped, swaying in the breeze, like they know they're guarding treasure. You disembark at a rickety wooden pier. The sun hangs overhead like a suspended bell. The air smells of damp wood spice and ambition. This is the only place on Earth for centuries where nutmeg was known to grow. And not just nutmeg, but mace too. The soft red lace that clings like spider silk around the nutmeg seed veined like coral, dried into strands and ground into gold by cooks and chemists alike. Nutmeg isn't just a flavor, it was once a fever. European traders risked everything to control this place. Fortresses rose here like Scar's stone towers built by foreign hands with trembling maps and iron greed. The Dutch especially saw nutmeg as profit incarnate. You walk through a grove with a local guide. She stoops beside a cracked pod and shows you the two treasures inside the brown nutmeg kernel and the red net of mace that once made it gleam like a fruit with its own halo. The spice smells sweet, almost floral, but underneath it there's fire. In Europe, apothecaries used it to cure plague. In kitchens, it flavored pies and perfumes. One 17th century doctor claimed it could banish sadness. Another insisted it cured baldness. Historians still argue whether nutmeg's legendary healing powers were myth or clever marketing, but people believed. And belief is its own currency. You pass a colonial warehouse, now empty. The doors are half-open hinges groaning. Once ships lined up outside that very building, barrels stacked high with dried seeds, each worth more than its weight in silver. You peek inside. The air is still warm with the scent of spice. Dust swirls in the golden light. Someone's carved a heart into the wooden beam. Inside it, a name, just initials, really. A love letter, or maybe a warning. Out near the coast, children play with dried nutmeg shells, skipping them across the water. A boy wears a necklace of them like Lucky Charms. A girl holds one up and squints through the hole like a spyglass. Further uphill, an old man sells spice-scented cloths. He fans himself lazily smiling when you ask what makes the best deal. The Dutch wanted barrels, he says. We kept the seeds. You sit with him under the shade of a banyan tree. He gives you a cup of nutmeg tea, rich and strange. There's something haunting in the taste, like memory, like something half-forgotten. He tells you that nutmeg is no longer war-worthy. The world has moved on, spices are cheap, accessible. But still, when the wind is just right, ships come back, not with cannons, but with notebooks, cameras, dreams. The island still remembers, and so will you. You're in Europe now, somewhere colder, somewhere filled with wool and whispers. It's market day in a bustling medieval town. The streets are lined with bright fabric canopies and slanted wooden stalls. Chickens peck at crumbs beside carts full of pickled fish. But you're not here for poultry. You're here for saffron. And so is everyone else. The moment you step into the spice aisle, the air changes. Everything smells faintly metallic and floral like honey kissed by smoke. Men in cloaks trimmed with fur speak in low tones. Women with tightly wrapped braids carry silver scales in the folds of their sleeves. At the far end of the stall row, a merchant dressed in deep indigo and suspicious confidence guards a basket the size of a hat box. Inside, fragments of gold-red threads. Saffron. Not flakes, not powder. Threads. The stigma of the crocus sativus flower, hand-plucked and sun-dried, each one worth more than its weight in silver. You lean closer. The merchant coughs gently, as if to say closer still, and I charge for the breath. It's the most expensive spice in medieval Europe and the most forged. Merchants mix saffron with safflower. They dye onion skins. They fluff up batches with strings soaked in ochre and vinegar, which is why there are laws, serious laws. In 15th century Nuremberg, saffron adulteration was punishable by imprisonment, exile, or in some accounts, execution. Historians still argue whether this was about protecting health taste or simply controlling profit. But either way, saffron was guarded like treasure. You pass a city official, his robes stiff with civic pride, checking a merchant's pouch with iron tweezers. A child nearby whispers, "Last week they caught a man with beetroot-dyed threads." The merchant nearby shudders as though remembering a public shaming. And still, the trade continues. You slip into a quiet alley behind the spice stalls. A woman beckons you into a stone cellar lit by oil lamps. She wears gloves. On a velvet cloth, she unrolls her wares, real saffron, in little packets sealed with wax and stamped with a sigil of a crocus flower. You buy one, not because you need it, but because it feels like buying starlight. Outside in the marketplace again, someone begins cooking. A pot bubbles with rice-tinted gold, saffron. A nobleman walks by and comments on the aroma. "We must be near Spain," he chuckles, "or heaven." A passing friar mutters something about gluttony, then eyes the pot with longing. Saffron makes everything feel extravagant. It doesn't just flavor, it transforms. A peasant's dish becomes a noble's feast. A dull evening becomes a golden one. Even now, your fingertips smell of it sharp, earthy, almost metallic. It lingers. And tonight, in a candlelit inn above the square, you'll eat saffron soup beside a window, glowing with autumn light. You'll remember this moment, the hush of the cellar, the weight of the packet, the smell of simmering gold. Because in this world of forgotten fortunes, some treasures aren't hidden. They're stirred. You walk now into the desert. Not in a dream, but it feels like one. The sun above is heavy and white, and the dunes stretch endlessly in every direction, soft as flour and hot as iron. Your boots fill with sand, but you keep going. Because you're following a caravan. Tall camels stride ahead of you, their shadows long and swaying. Their packs are wrapped in dyed linen and fastened with silver charms, amulets, against thieves, storms, and mischief. The drivers sing under their breath, old songs passed down like passwords. And somewhere deep in those bundles, nestled in padded jars and wrapped in waxed cloth, frankincense, the resin of trees that grow only in the hard, dry corners of Arabia and the Horn of Africa, sap scraped from pale bark hardened into golden tears, burned in temples, in homes on royal pyres. You catch up to a camel just as a breeze lifts the corner of its pack. A sharp, citrusy scent floods the air, bright, resinous, ancient. You blink. The desert seems to shimmer more than usual. Frankincense wasn't just a scent, it was a presence. Ancient Egyptians used it in funerary rites. Priests in Jerusalem burned it on altars. Roman emperors demanded it by the ton. At one point, it was considered so precious that Nero allegedly burned a year's supply during a single funeral. Historians still argue whether it was a show of grief or just a statement of wealth. You rest beside a rocky outcrop where a spice broker sets up a makeshift scale. He measures out tiny lumps of resin, weighs them against bits of bronze. A deal is made. Hands are shaken. A goat bleats in approval. A boy nearby fans a copper censer filled with glowing coals. He tosses in a piece of frankincense, and the smoke rises in twisting ribbons. It smells clean, sweet, meditative. Suddenly, everyone in the camp moves slower, softer. In the distance, a stone city glows orange in the heat. Petra, maybe, or one of the other ancient desert trade centers where spices and silence were equally valuable. You head toward it, your pack swinging at your side, your sandals whispering against the sand. Inside the city walls, the market is quieter than others. People speak in low tones, their eyes bright with deals and stories. A priest buys a pouch of resin and presses it to his chest like a prayer. A woman in layered veils sells frankincense oil in tiny glass bottles with stoppers carved from bone. You buy one. The stopper squeaks when you open it, and the scent hits you like a memory from before your own birth. Later, as night falls and stars begin to pepper the sky like spilled salt, you sit beside the fading coals of the campfire. Someone adds another piece of frankincense to the embers, and the smoke lifts slowly, curling into the dark. Around you, the traders fall silent, not in exhaustion, but reverence. Because frankincense doesn't just scent the air, it holds it still. You wake to rain. Soft and steady, like the rhythm of a patient drummer, it dapples the stone street outside a damp city in early spring. Somewhere to the east, maybe Byzantium, maybe Damascus, there's a different kind of spice in the air. Something tart, something red, something electric. Sumac. You find it heaped in a wicker basket in the corner of a small covered market, glinting like dried rubies. It looks like crushed velvet, tastes like lemon in sunlight, smells like the back corner of a well-stocked apothecary. The vendor leans over his stall, wrapped in a russet shawl, offering tiny paper cones filled with sumac to curious passers-by. For the throat, the stew, the scandal, he says with a wink. You take a pinch and let it dissolve on your tongue. Tangy bright somehow, both grounding and thrilling. Sumac doesn't have the fame of cinnamon or the allure of saffron, but here it reigns quietly, sprinkled on meats, stirred into yogurt, brewed in teas to soothe fevers and heartbreak. You slip into a kitchen tucked behind the market, a cavernous place with open stone hearths and long wooden tables scarred by centuries of slicing. The cook is a woman in a teal headscarf, her hands stained with spice. She moves like she's dancing, tossing sumac over roast lamb like it's confetti. Sumac is the soul, she tells you. Salt is the logic, but sumac, she smiles. Sumac is the story. You nod, because you understand. But not everyone did. In medieval Europe, sumptuary laws began to restrict spice consumption, dictating who could afford where or even eat certain luxuries. Sumac often appeared on the wrong side of these lists, especially when used to tint foods for the poor in ways the nobles thought too rich-looking. Historians still argue whether these laws were meant to preserve class distinctions or simply enforce blandness among the masses. Either way, people found loopholes. They always do. You wander out into a courtyard, where students from a nearby madrasa are gathered under an awning passing around a bowl of lentils. The bowl is small, the meal modest, but it's dusted in sumac, and the boys eat like kings. There's a mosaic under their feet, worn but still gleaming. In one corner, a faded script curves around the tiles. Bitterness lives in secrets. Tartness tells the truth. The rain stops, the air clears. You walk through alleys dappled with late sunlight, spotting sumac vines climbing along garden walls, their leaves still slick with raindrops. A child squats under a windowsill, mashing berries into a paste with a smooth river stone. Her grandmother watches from the doorway, arms crossed, amused. At dinner that night in a tiled courtyard, lit by lanterns, someone places a dish of eggplant in front of you. The scent is smoky sweet, and the garnish, a final, generous dusting of sumac. It tastes like lemon, like earth, like home, and somehow you know you'll never forget it. Now you're in the South, the deep South. Thick green forests hum with insect choirs. Warm rain clings to everything, your hair, your clothes, the soft clay path beneath your feet. You wipe your brow and follow the scent of something rich, dark, and floral. Cardamom. Here in the lush hills of South India, it grows low to the ground, clusters of green pods nestled beneath tall, leafy stalks. The plant isn't showy. It doesn't demand attention. But when you pluck a pod and crush it gently between your fingers, the aroma is intoxicating, cool, and sharp like mint dipped in citrus and wrapped in velvet. The air in the spice grove is warm and damp. Bees buzz lazily over the blossoms. A man in a faded saffron tunic walks through the rows barefoot with a woven basket slung over one shoulder. He nods to you and gestures for you to follow. He shows you how it's harvested the pods, hand-picked, sorted by size, dried slowly in smoky wooden sheds. They're guarded like heirlooms. A single basket could buy a mule. 2 baskets, a marriage. You pass through a spice market at the edge of a temple town. Bells chime in the distance. Smoke curls from a shrine where women in teal and ochre saris light oil lamps beside bowls of fragrant offerings, rice flowers, cardamom pods. A vendor calls you over. He opens a cloth bundle and reveals an assortment of pods, green, white, even black. Each with its own scent, its own heat, its own purpose. Green for sweets, he says, tapping one. Black for fire, white for diplomacy. He smiles. Spices know things. You walk into a kitchen behind a longhouse near the river. Inside, an elderly cook stirs a pot of milky tea with one hand while grinding cardamom seeds with the other. The scent fills the room. She scoops up the foam with practiced grace and pours it into clay cups lined on a wooden tray. You sip. It tastes like comfort, like complexity, like memories you don't know you had. Historians still argue whether cardamom spread through ancient trade with the Greeks or came later with Arab spice merchants. What they agree on, it was always precious, so prized that in some Indian temples it was used as ritual currency. Offerings to gods who understood that the best prayers are whispered in steam and spice. Outside under the banyan trees, monks chant softly. A child runs by with a basket of pods balanced on her head. The river gurgles nearby. Somewhere a parrot screeches as if to remind you, yes, this is real. And just as quickly, the moment slows again. Evening settles like a shawl across the hills. The air grows cooler. The scent of cardamom clings to your sleeve. And for the first time in hours, you realize you haven't thought of gold once. You leave the jungles behind and find yourself in England now, but not the soggy, smoky version you might expect. No, this is Tudor England, where everything smells of roasted meat, wet stone, and ambition. The kitchens of the palace are alive. Fires roar in blackened hearths. Servants shout, clatter sprint. The ceilings are high and smoke-stained, the floors slippery with grease and spilled broth. You've come for a feast, but you're not here to dine. You're here for mace. Not the weapon, the spice. A lacy red filament that wraps delicately around the nutmeg seed like a secret. You find it laid out in a wooden bowl on a scarred butcher's table, beside piles of cinnamon bark, dried bay leaves, and curled orange peels. The cook, her apron streaked with something that looks like regret, waves you away as she reaches for the mace. Royal pie, she mutters, no mace, no point. She sprinkles it like fairy dust over a thick stew bubbling in a copper cauldron. The scent rises instantly, warm, sharp, slightly floral. It's subtle, but it changes everything. In Tudor England, mace was a noble spice found in puddings. pies, sausages, and all manner of elaborate dishes no peasant would dare pronounce. Historians still argue whether the use of mace in royal kitchens was about flavor or showmanship. Some believe it masked the taste of aging meat. Others insist it was simply another way to show off one's wealth, an edible crown tucked inside a pie. You peek into the main hall where the feast is being set. Tapestries line the walls, servants move like clockwork, and at the center of it all, a massive meat pie the size of a small dog. It's glossy with egg wash. There's probably a bird inside, possibly still alive. The guests arrive in a swirl of velvets, pearls, and powdered tempers. The nobility lean back in their chairs like they were born reclining. A bishop sneezes, two nobles whisper and giggle. A child pokes the pie with a golden spoon. Then triumph, the crust is cut, the scent escapes. Everyone leans forward. It's the mace. They don't know it, but it's there, threading through the dish like an invisible chord in a song. It softens the gaminess, lifts the sweetness, makes everything seem strangely enough intentional. You wander outside where the kitchen maids are stealing scraps. One pulls a sliver of the pie apart with calloused fingers, then closes her eyes when she tastes it. The spice, she murmurs. Always the spice. She gives you a pinch wrapped in linen. For luck, she says, you nod. Because what else do you say when someone gives you part of a royal recipe? Back in the kitchen, the fire's dying. The pie is half gone. The cook sighs and begins scrubbing a cauldron with salt and judgment. You step into the cool night air. The stars are out. You unfold the linen and sniff. Yes, there it is. Mace. Sharp, subtle, undeniable. You tuck it into your sleeve like a secret. Because in this world of powdered wigs and powdered spice, you've just been handed something truly rare. Something that tastes like power. The sun is hot again. The ground beneath your sandals dry and cracked. You're in West Africa now, on the banks of a wide river, near a village that hums with quiet motion. Men mend nets in the shallows. Women stir clay pots suspended over low fires. Children chase goats through clouds of sunlit dust. And tucked inside the folds of a wide basket near the market's edge, grains of paradise. Tiny seeds dark and round, glinting like peppercorns but with a glimmer of mystery. You roll one between your fingers. It feels light but firm, like it could burst into flame or flavor at any moment. You pop one into your mouth. The taste is sharp. Spicy, yes, but not like black pepper. It tingles, it burns. Then it blooms with something floral, like cardamom's wild cousin, like cinnamon with an attitude. You cough. The vendor laughs. They wake you up, don't they? He offers you a calabash bowl filled with stewfish millet and crushed grains of paradise. For strength, he says, and you believe him. Every spoonful is bright with heat and somehow joyful. Grains of paradise, also called melageta pepper, were once shipped north in enormous quantities across the Sahara through camel caravans and coastal ports. In medieval Europe, they were a prized substitute when black pepper grew scarce or expensive. In fact, for a time, they were so popular that guinea pepper nearly replaced true pepper in noble kitchens. Historians still argue whether this substitution was a matter of taste or trade disruption. But what's certain is that these little seeds were once mistaken for magic. You walk with a trader along a trail lined with shade trees and palm. He explains that the seeds come from a wild plant that blooms with purple flowers and seed pods shaped like tiny drums. Harvesting them isn't easy. They sting. They resist. They matter. He gives you a pouch to carry, for bargaining, he says, or flirting. At the river, an elder woman chants softly while roasting a handful of grains over coals. The scent rises earthy and rich. She stirs them into a bowl of oil and offers a fingerful. It tastes like something between ginger and pepper and firelight. You sit beside her as evening falls. The village grows quiet. Smoke curls into the dark. You hear laughter echoing off the water. Nearby, someone sings, not loud, just enough to carry across the current. You tip the pouch of grains into your hand and listen to them rattle like coins. They don't look like gold, but they might as well be. In a world built on flavor and fire, these were once a form of currency. And tonight, they're just enough to buy you a moment of peace beside a river that's been trading stories for 1,000 years. You're back in marble now. Rome, or something like it, domed and grand, echoing with footsteps and wrapped in the scent of olive oil, sun-warmed stone, and ambition. Here you find long pepper. Before black pepper ruled the spice world, this was the true star. Spindly and shriveled like a pine cone that forgot how to grow long pepper looks almost alien. But in the kitchens of emperors, philosophers, and gladiator trainers alike, it was everything. You find it in the market, arranged neatly beside bundles of dried figs and curls of date bark. The vendor slices a pepper spike in half to show you its rich, dusty core. More heat, he promises, more bite. The kind that stings and then hugs you. You nibble the tip. There's sweetness, then heat, then a kind of hum, like your mouth is quietly vibrating. In the days of Pliny and Galen, long pepper was used for more than food, it was medicine. Romans ground it into ointments, brewed it in wine, even wore it as a protective charm. Historians still argue whether long pepper was phased out due to flavor preferences changing trade routes or simply because black pepper was easier to transport. But there was a time when this spice cost more than gold. You pass a domus kitchen where a cook is crushing long pepper in a stone mortar. The pestle thuds rhythmically as steam curls from a stew pot. Meat lentils garum, and the sharp scent of long pepper drifting upward like incense for the stomach. Outside beneath the portico, two senators argue about taxation while sipping spiced wine. One gestures with a scroll, the other with a goblet. The wine is dark, heady, and unmistakably peppered. You cross the forum where a spice trader boasts loudly about his latest shipment from the east. Twice sunned, thrice guarded, 7 camels worth, he cries. The crowd murmurs. He could be lying. Probably is. It doesn't matter. Long pepper holds a sort of sacred status here. A seasoning, yes, but also a symbol. To season a dish with long pepper is to say, I am not like you. It separates the powerful from the merely wealthy, the eccentric from the boring. You duck into a bathhouse where the heat opens your pores and the air smells faintly of resin and citrus. A servant pours warm water over your shoulders and hands you a cup of vinum piperatum. It burns. You grin. Later in the shadow of an aqueduct, you find a small scroll tucked behind a statue, a love poem unsigned. Every stanza ends with Piper Longum. You think someone once compared passion to this. Not gold, not roses, but spice. Sharp, strange, unforgettable. You pocket the scroll. Because in Rome, even the love letters taste like fire. Now the air is thick with green. Jungle green, swamp green. The kind of green that swallows sound and hums with invisible life. You're on the island of Java, where the leaves grow bigger than shields and the rain doesn't fall so much as pour sideways and upwards and from beneath if it feels like it. You've come here following the route called galangal. It looks humble, knobby, pale, unassuming. But break it open and it smells like pine and citrus and the faint edge of a blade. Not quite ginger, not quite anything else. You find it in a shaded glade where an apothecary is kneeling beside a patch of tilled soil. Her robe is the color of old bronze, her fingers dark with earth. She digs gently, lifting one gnarled root, brushing it clean, and holding it to her nose. Galangal doesn't shout, she says, it whispers. In the village nearby, you spot bundles of it, hanging from the rafters to dry. Beside them, jars filled with dried bark, cracked seeds, tiny sun-dried fish. Galangal is sold by weight, but more often by word of mouth. Because here, it isn't just a spice, it's medicine. A healer crushes it with tamarind and salt for a fever tonic. A cook shaves it into soup to ward off spirits. A priest tucks a sliver into the folds of a shrine wrapped in banana leaf and hope. You follow a caravan preparing to depart, not with gold or silks, but elephants. Great gray slow-stepping giants draped in patterned cloth, their drivers murmuring blessings before they move. Hidden in the pack slung over the elephants' flanks spice, including galangal. You ask why the elephants are needed. The spice merchant shrugs, because you can't trust a mule with medicine. Historians still argue whether galangal reached medieval Europe via Arab traders or overland from Southeast Asia. In medieval manuscripts, it appears in recipes and remedies alike. Charlemagne reportedly ordered it planted in his imperial gardens. You walk through a small port town where the air smells like fish firewood and spice oil. An old man shows you a brittle letter from a Portuguese captain scrawled with references to the reddish root that restores virility. He winks, sold well in Lisbon. You sip a broth rich with coconut milk, lemongrass, and finely shaved galangal. The flavor is sharper than expected, like ginger that went to university and came back a philosopher. It doesn't overpower, it guides. A child nearby offers you a tiny carved elephant made from galangal root. It smells sweet. You slip it into your pocket, unsure whether it's meant as a gift, a charm, or an invoice. Later, by torchlight, you follow a line of women down a jungle path, each carrying baskets of fresh roots to market. Their footsteps are silent. The jungle hums around them like a great leafy drum. You reach the edge of the forest and look back. And you understand some spices aren't just for taste. They're stories, they're rituals, they're power grown in the dark. You find yourself beneath an arched doorway shadowed in cool stone. Somewhere in Persia, Or maybe it's the edge of the Silk Road where Persia dissolves into empire after empire and borders matter less than the scent of the cargo. A wooden chest creaks open. Inside sandalwood, not shavings, not oils, logs, smooth, pale, fragrant, the kind that command hush in a room. The kind traded not for coins but for promises. You run a hand over one. It's cool to the touch, but the smell it leaves on your fingers is warm and dry, like incense left behind by a wise man. You're in a merchant chamber now, dimly lit with lanterns tucked behind a silversmith's shop. Two men argue in whispers over sandalwood bundles, the tension so thick you could slice it with a prayer. One is dressed in layered robes dyed deep teal. The other wears a dagger that's more for show than safety. They are not arguing about price. They are arguing about secrecy. Because sandalwood in this time and place isn't just scent, it's a signal. It perfumes the halls of royalty. It anoints the dead. It accompanies the writing of letters too dangerous to be traced. Historians still argue whether the trade in sandalwood grew from religious need, medical use, or sheer olfactory obsession. In truth, it was all of these. You walk through a back corridor where a scribe dips a brush into ink perfumed with sandalwood oil. It calms the nerves, he explains, and keeps the rats away. A noble woman passes, trailed by servants bearing chests filled with silk gems, and just one dedicated entirely to sandalwood. She catches your eye, briefly not smiling, but you catch the glint of gold ink painted along her eyelids. It smells faintly of smoke and spice. In the bazaar, vendors wave strips of sandalwood cloth in the air, drawing in buyers like moths. A beggar sits beneath an awning, fanning herself with a sandalwood paddle carved with poems. You recognize a verse about silence. You spend your coins on a comb made from the heartwood. When you run your fingers over the teeth, it hums with a scent that somehow knows your name. Later at twilight, you're led to a small tea house built over a reflecting pool. The floor is sandalwood. The cups are lacquered with its oil. The tea itself laced with it. The conversation around you is quiet-coded. One man mentions a border skirmish, another a betrothal undone by scent alone. A courier leans close to his client and whispers, "It's hidden in the wood grain." You don't know if he means secrets or sandalwood. You walk outside. The sky is ink blue. The lamps are lit. And for a moment, the wind carries that unmistakable sweetness, earthy, resinous, serene. A scent like memory, like something too old to be bought. You close your eyes and inhale. Because in this chamber of trade, perfume, and politics, sandalwood speaks louder than words. The air is burning, not with heat, but with intent. You are in a port city, but it smells like a battlefield. Smoke curls up in thick black ropes from the docks. Ships burn in the harbor, their sails ablaze like paper prayers gone wrong. You've stumbled into a spice war, not metaphorically, literally, the Banda Islands again. But this time, centuries after your first visit, and now they are caught in the grip of European empires with far too much ambition and far too little self-awareness. The scent of nutmeg hangs in the air, sweet, acrid, bitter. You catch glimpses of broken spice crates floating in the shallows, their contents darkening the water like spilled ink. You pass soldiers shouting in Dutch, Portuguese, and English. The accents clash louder than the muskets. They are not here for territory, they are here for trees. Nutmeg, mace, clove. Spices so valuable they built entire navies to chase them. So potent that kings signed treaties they never read, and merchants bribed governors with barrels instead of coins. A young sailor stumbles past his face smudged with ash, holding a nutmeg branch like a torch. They're burning the groves, he whispers. If we can't have it, no one can. Historians still argue whether the violence that swept through the Spice Islands was motivated purely by profit or by empire's need to own flavor. Either way, the outcome was the same blood treaties, scorched earth. You hide in a stone warehouse, its walls thick with spice dust. The scent is overwhelming, intoxicating even now. You find ledgers with careful rows of ink cloves. A lifetime of accounting, a catalog of obsession. Outside, someone screams, then laughs, then sobs. The lines are blurry now, and yet amid all this chaos, someone is cooking. A woman in a red headscarf squats beside a clay pot protected by a ruined stone wall. She stirs something rich with nutmeg and coconut milk. You approach. She sees you, lifts a spoon, and says, "Only even wars need dinner." You sit beside her as cannon fire echoes from the coast. She passes you the bowl, and you eat as the sky darkens to plum. The spices calm your stomach and stir your thoughts. Sweet, warm, complicated. When the firelight flickers, you see a glint of something buried in the soot. You dig. It's a silver coin stamped not with a king's face, but a nutmeg pod. Because in this world, the line between food and fortune was never that wide. Later, as the last flames fade into smoke and the night sea returns to calm you, walk the dock one more time. The air is heavy with ash and spice. You whisper into the dark, all this for flavor. And the wind seems to answer, yes, you arrive in a quiet place. No more ships, no flaming docks, no shouting merchants, no glittering courts. Just a roadside inn tucked between hills the color of burnt straw and sky just beginning to lean into dusk. You don't know where you are exactly, somewhere between empires, on a trade road long since bypassed. But the air is cool, the hearth is warm, and there's a pot of spiced wine steaming gently on the coals. You step inside. A woman in a linen apron looks up, nods, and points to a bench near the fire. You sit, she pours. The cup is earthenware, uneven with a crack running through the glaze. But the scent familiar? Saffron, clove, cinnamon, a whisper of pepper, a ghost of nutmeg. All the fortunes of the past simmered into one humble brew. You sip. It's sweet with a bitterness that settles somewhere behind your teeth. You close your eyes and taste stories. Once this would have been a king's drink, now it's offered in a chipped mug with no ceremony, no title, no guards at the door. The shelves here are lined with glass jars, half full of dusty spice. Their labels have faded, some are illegible, one simply says in neat handwriting. Another reads, good for the stomach, or dreams. You glance around. A child plays with a pepper mill the size of his head. A traveler beside you dips bread into oil laced with crushed cardamom. No one talks much. They just eat, breathe, rest. And you think this is how it ends, not with wars or flames or caravans, but with a cupboard of almost empty jars. Historians still argue whether the Spice Age ended with new trade routes or changing tastes, but here in this inn that time forgot it's clear. It didn't end. It faded. Like scent from old fabric, like smoke from a dying ember. But there is comfort in that, a softness, a kind of peace. You lean back, your belly warm, your cup half full, your thoughts quiet. The world of spice, once loud with gold grit and glory, is now just taste and memory. And it's enough. Now the flavors begin to settle. The voices fade, the market stalls close, the ships have sailed. The spice jars you've opened tonight, cardamom, mace, sumac, saffron, can rest. You've followed their trail across deserts, jungles, kitchens, and palaces. You've held history between your fingertips like seeds. You've walked through the heart of a world shaped not by war or crowns, but by scent, by craving, by the tiniest flakes of bark and bud. And now you return to silence. You imagine yourself curling up near a hearth with a blanket scented faintly of cinnamon, a cup of something warm resting in your hands. There's no empire to fight for, no caravan to catch, no scales to weigh, just breath, and the knowledge that what once shaped fortunes now sits quietly in your cupboard. Let the world grow still. Let the spices fade into dreams. Let your thoughts soften and sink like cloves into wine. There is nothing left to chase, nothing left to trade. Just rest, because you've tasted history tonight, and that's more than enough. End of script. Sweet dreams.